I'm wondering, Dad, we spoke last time about how I misunderstood strength and I kind of saw you actually as weak. I wonder
Mm.
if there's a dynamic, and I see this dynamic many places in our society, that sons have kind of overly dominant, domineering, or emotionally unavailable fathers, withdrawn fathers, or something like that, and kind of resolve to not be like that. And the pendulum swings a little bit the other way.
Yeah,
And so we were just talking before we started the recording today about the No More Mr. Nice Guy book and how we're living in a society of men who hide their continuous wanting and desiring more for themselves behind an exterior of niceness, right? So, Dad, welcome for episode, I think number 5, right? We're getting well
yeah,
into it of Father Son Talks. And I actually just sent a message out the other day where I wanted to encourage some of the guys I'm working with to take a look at one of our conversations. We spoke about true strength as opposed to, what a young man thinks strength is in, like
think
just being
strength
assertive and
really is.
dominating and things like that.
Huh.
Um, and so I wrote a little bit. I just kind of naturally wrote about the father wound because I think that's really at the heart of why we're doing these conversations. I think many men today walk around with issues from their childhood related to their father, and it influences so much in their life. And that's been very much the case in my life. And
Yeah,
I'm really happy we've managed to stay in conversations for a long time. But I know that my lack of understanding of you as a father has caused me to really waste a lot of time and energy and go a lot of wrong ways in my life as well. Um, and so I wrote that little text and actually just got a lot of response from it. And a whole lot of people were talking about it and stuff like that. So we decided, let's talk a little bit about the fatherhood. I asked you about that. And so you agreed that we could do that a bit today. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know,
Good.
Dad, what's your thoughts as we dive into this topic?
About my father and my relationship with him, mainly, I think we're talking about. And yeah, I don't know quite how to phrase it, but for me, my father was a bit of a distant man and wasn't always around. He had, obviously, at that time, things were difficult. A lot of people, a lot of men particularly, had to find work, had to find extra work. My dad always had 2 jobs from an early age that I can remember until I was about 10, 11 years old, I suppose. So yeah, there was an interesting relationship I think I had with my father.
Hmm. Yeah. So, what would you say were if you were to say like a father wound, would you say there's specific things that happened or specific aspects of your relationship that could have
Yeah,
left some kind of wound in some way?
yeah, certainly were some things. I suppose one of the early things in my life when I was a bit youngish, my father, I didn't particularly know the details at the time because I was a bit too young, but he had an affair and he was involved with another woman. And things went a bit difficult at my home, and things were up and down. I suppose I was the youngest boy as well, so I was a bit close to my mom at the time. And so when my dad got involved with another woman, it was quite a hurtful situation. My mom didn't tell us much about it, but yeah, as a young boy, that was something that was really kind of hurtful to me. And I thought, how can that happen? What's he doing? What's going on here? And
Yeah.
then my mom attempted suicide. So that was a very, and I suppose I blamed him for it more than anyone else because of the situation that happened. Um, and it was a strange thing for me because I didn't even, my mom had been sleeping badly. That's kind of the way we knew things weren't quite what they should be.
Hmm.
And then one morning she slept late, and us as young boys, we just thought, oh well, great, because my dad was working shifts. So we just thought, well, she's having a good sleep, so just leave her to it. And I came home from school on that particular day, and I remember my aunt being there with my dad, and then finding out that she was in hospital, not quite particularly knowing the details of it, and really only finding out afterwards that it was an attempted suicide.
Hmm.
So that left some, yeah, wound in my life.
Yeah, yeah. Probably even worse for the fact that your mom then died in a car accident not many years after that, right?
Yes, not many years after, and
Oma,
well,
I call her, right? Oma and Opa.
oh
That's
my,
the Afrikaans names
yeah,
for grandma,
oh,
grandfather.
And so there was actually going to be a break. My mom was going to move to another town where my brother was, and we were all going to move there. And then my dad came to see my mom one evening, and I remember the next morning my mom waking me up and saying that my dad's what would you say? He's repented from that situation and he wants to come back home, and she accepted him back home.
Mhm.
And I remember my Afrikaans word. First thing I said was "verdomp." I was not happy about the fact that he was coming back into the home. But that's what happened. And then, yeah, as you say, about a year or two later, then my mom died in that car accident. And
What
then the
is
relationship,
Fordum?
damn it, I suppose would be the closest English word to
Damn
it.
it. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my mom died in a car accident not long after that. And we were a little bit at sixes and sevens then. My one brother had already left home. He was at college. He was working by then. He's probably finished his college career. So it was my older brother, just older than me, Eddie, and myself at
Mhm.
home, and we were a bit here and there. We ended up going to a hostel in our local school for about 3/4 of a year,
Mhm.
and then coming back into a flat with my father.
Mhm.
And he was, say, working shifts very much. So I was very much on my own, did my own thing.
Mhm.
Because then my brother, that's just older than I, Eddie, he went to another school in another town, and I was kind of alone at home, could do my own thing.
Mhm.
But I think something happened to me, and I can't remember how or where, and I can't think of it as a light bulb moment, as a particular incident. But I just realized I'm not my father at some point. And I think I realized it quite early on in my life. And I came to an understanding, and I can't tell you how, I can't explain it particularly, where it was just I could make the decisions about what sort of man I wanted to be.
Mhm.
And so I think those hurts that came weren't, how can I put it? They weren't deadly. I didn't feel them as wounds that would destroy me. And I
No.
didn't also feel them as wounds that would influence me for the rest of my life. Fairly early on, I had this attitude that I am me,
Mhm.
and I need to make decisions as to what I'm going to allow to form me and what kind of person I wanted to be.
Yeah. I guess you decided like so when I hear about your childhood, it's incredibly different from my childhood because
Yeah,
I've had a very attentive father who played with us, and you know, some of my greatest memories were like when we lived in this complex with many different houses that were similar in that
yeah,
kind of community, and then there was all these kids, and we'd be out playing with all the kids. But my dad would come and play with us, all of us, and you know, be like organizing the games, and everything would be so much more exciting because there was like a father that was organizing everything and doing it. And but even from like you know some, I think my earliest memories is like just in England bouncing a ball together with you, like learning how to bounce a ball
oh yeah,
and feeling that kind of engagement. And you know, you had this like video camera right from when we were born, basically, where you were filming things and stuff like that. So I'm wondering, Dad, one of the things that I often hear from guys as well is like they remember making a decision, and you also spoke about like you could decide what kind of man you wanted to be. And so I guess you did decide like I don't want to be a father like my own father is. Is that
yeah.
maybe something that you decided?
And and again, I can't think of that being my conscious decision. I don't want to be a father like my father was. I
Mhm.
just had this understanding that I am who I am, and I wanted to be, a particular type of person. And I didn't particularly think of I don't want to be like my father.
No.
I was just thinking, yeah, he's had his troubles, he's had his ups and downs. And of course, then after Mama died, things changed because we moved house. We went to the place where we were, and I spent a lot of time with my father. But he was never an engaging, emotional, heartwarming kind of person. If I wanted practical advice, I'd go and ask my father. But
Mhm.
other than that, our communication was very, uh, how can I put it, very non emotional,
Yeah.
non heartwarming. I don't recall ever getting a hug from my dad, for example, and I
Never a
don't ever
hug.
remember feeling bad about it either.
He never told you he loved you, I guess, either. Or did he?
No, I can't remember that. Yeah,
We spoke
appreciate
about
it though.
before. I remember this memory. One of the few memories I have of Opa was arriving at his house one time when he was already quite old. I was maybe 10, 12, I guess, something like that. I don't know if I was that
Yeah.
old. And then as we arrived in his door, then he suddenly started crying and no one really knew why. And then he just said like, "Oh, I'm just so happy to see all of you. I'm so happy to see you guys." And so there was something there, I guess, of like his heart opening up towards the end of his life.
Yeah, I think that had a lot to do with the change in me. As I, when he got married to another woman, which I absolutely despised, couldn't stand this other, my stepmother.
Hmm.
And then him and my stepmom got divorced. And one of the things he then said to me was that this is the first time anyone's ever taken him to court. And I was the one that took him there for this court case, for this divorce. Um, and I was the one of the sons that kept communicating with him. So although we were living far away, we were in Bloemfontein at the time. We were
Hmm.
going to a convention in Johannesburg, and I said to my dad, "Well, we're going to be going that way. Can we pop in and come and say hello?" And
Hmm.
he was so touched by that that when we arrived, he burst into tears. I thought he was going to a funeral.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say the first time someone take him to court, you mean like you helped him in helping him with transport to get to court and supported him being there,
Yeah,
and like where, yeah,
transport, be
okay,
there for him, and
yeah,
when he walked out of the courtroom or out of the thing, I was there to just be with him.
yeah,
And he was
yeah,
a very unemotional man. I think I've only seen him cry twice. Was his own mother's funeral my and my mom's funeral.
yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. Hmm. So where did you learn? Certainly, Dad. Like one of the things you're good at is communication, and also like um, listening. I would say it's one of your key aspects. So where did you learn that?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of always felt that I've been a fairly good listener.
Mhm.
And maybe it came from my mom's side. She was a fairly good listener and a good communicator. So maybe that's where it came from. Inherited a bit of that gene from her side.
Yeah.
But I think all my other two brothers, I think, are also fairly good communicators.
Mhm. Yeah.
My oldest brother now is very insular. He's very, how can I put it, brief with his conversations, with me anyway. I don't know if it's just because of me, because he's a salesman and he's quite a good communicator in being a salesman.
Yeah. So the thing that I kind of want to get to here is, obviously, in many ways, like you've been able to learn from the experiences of your father,
Yeah,
and it sounds like he also really grew through his life. Maybe he grew up in a society where that kind of emotional connection wasn't a part of what was expected of a man, and he was a Boer man. They had been through a war. I guess his grandfather had been through a war, right? Which was a horrible, horrible war. And so I guess they were under very different types of pressures. And so things have generally been getting better. But I also think that maybe there's a pattern that has continued in some ways. And I think like the thing that I want to ask you about is the fact that, you have two sons and they live, one of them 10,000 kilometers away, that's me. The other one 14,000 kilometers away,
kilometers
perhaps.
away.
Um, and when I got married initially, there was a missing piece in my
Mm,
understanding of what it meant to be a father and a husband. In I'm really understanding the needs of. I think probably hopefully no one will get too offended if I say like Scandinavian women are slightly more demanding than South African women. They have higher expectations, and so I think very quickly my shortcomings in not being able to meet the needs of my first wife resulted in then a divorce and also a very large lack of like enough engagement in my own son, which I think you saw back then. But for some reason, at that stage, I didn't at all understand the importance of family, of
yeah.
really that was the central brick and element and foundation of my life, really, that everything else kind of grew out. And if I could achieve things with my family, then I would have success in all other spheres of life. And so all the things had going with my career and social circles, whatever, was actually unimportant when it came to family. I didn't get that until I was like 30 something years old.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why, because I thought that in the home that was something that we focused on a lot and looked at and tried to build up. Um, as you finished your schooling, I think you were very like career focused, wanted to go and make a success. And at that time, things were quite difficult in South Africa because for you and for Mark to find decent employment and so on was very difficult. And I think that was an early move on your part to be able to get out, get into the world, further your career, because the prospects this side were poor, and that might have created. And in those days, of course, we didn't have what we got now. We couldn't communicate like this, and so there was a bit of a disconnect at that point of time in your life.
Mhm.
And I remember you writing letters, and I remember the particular one from Egypt where you were studying, and you wrote us a note from Egypt, and you said, "Well, you just love to see us," and we'd booked to go for a holiday down to Cape Town, and we just changed the whole arrangement and ended up meeting you in Egypt, which was a tremendous experience. But nevertheless, that there was a breakdown there, I think, in communicating,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that I think is attributed to that form, I don't know, that forming time, that forming period for you of
Mhm.
transitioning from being a student, if you like, to being an adult. There was a bit of a disconnect at that point.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, Dad, we spoke last time about how I misunderstood strength and I kind of saw you actually as weak. I wonder
Mm.
if there's a dynamic, and I see this dynamic many places in our society, that sons have kind of overly dominant, domineering, or emotionally unavailable fathers, withdrawn fathers, or something like that, and kind of resolve to, not be like that. And the pendulum swings a little bit the other way.
Yeah,
And so we were just talking before we started the recording today about the No More Mr. Nice Guy book and how we're living in a society of men who hide their kind of continuous wanting and desiring more for themselves behind an exterior of niceness, right? And we are so good at this that we convince ourselves even that we want to be nice. And so there's this. I think it's something that really characterizes actually the last two generations of men in Western society in some ways is the Mr. Nice Guy thing, where and so then maybe with me, then the pendulum swung the other way. It's like, well, I'm not going to be just this Mr. Nice Guy like my dad. I'm going to go out and achieve and going to, do stuff, and I'm going to, create a legacy and all these kinds of things,
oh,
right? Which
yeah.
obviously, yeah. So could one call that a bit of a father wound, this kind of swinging of the pendulum?
Yes, I think it's certainly the case. Like I say, my father grew up with this idea that cowboys don't cry, so you have to be the strong man, and he was the man who went to work and he provided, and that was basically all he did. The rest of it was left. And then we were in a generation where that began to shift. You're in a generation where that's shifted a whole lot more.
Yeah.
So one of
Collapsed.
the things now is that people have swung, and now that men can't be men anymore, they've now got to be something else. They've got to be soft. They've got to be undecisive. They've got to be, and it's left men in a quandary. They don't really know where they are. So I think this idea that their fathers weren't the kind of men that they perhaps wanted them to be, or the what modern society is kind of making men should be, their fathers weren't that, and I easily accepted that because I just saw that I was going to be different, and I didn't then feel that I'm wounded and unable to be something else. So for me, it was an easy transition, if you like. For you, I think it was maybe as I say, because of that disconnect at that particular point of time in your life, uh, you then went the other way. As you say, the pendulum swung the other way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly a lot to think about, and yeah. Um,
So for me and my relationship, there were two things. One, accepting my dad for who he is, and realizing he did the best he could at the time,
mhm.
and accepting that, and I was able to then let it go and just put it aside.
Mhm.
And I became, I think, my father's best friend in his old age.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I think like creating a man-to-man relationship with your father, I think we spoke a little bit about that on the first episode as well, is that things started shifting for me when we went on a walk together. I remember up in the Drakensberg in the
The
mountains in
boys.
South Africa,
Mm.
and I kind of came at you with a very strong argument for something that I felt was inconsistent in your worldview, and kind of really put it out there like in my very tough, harsh, assertive way. And you listened very carefully, and you said like, "Oh, that's a very good point. I'm not really sure what the answer is to that." Even though it was very much kind of like attacking your entire identity in many ways. And I remember that just left me. It was like, huh, my dad's listening to me. That's really nice. And so that kind of like mutual respect really helped me to be able to move on and not just be kind of like, angry with dad or something like that, which I think was really happening under the surface. There was, even though with all my achievements and becoming like this big global corporate, important hotshots, traveling around the world and doing all kinds of stuff and whatever, that I was really just still trying to prove myself as the younger son in the family or something like that. Um, so yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think one of the important things in our relationship always is that you were accepted, even whatever state you were in and whatever you were doing and wherever you were going.
yeah,
You were just still our son, and we loved you.
yeah, good advice to fathers and mothers, I guess as well. That
Absolutely.
continue to your sons might do stupid stuff, but you said at the last that I think a couple of you have mentioned that to me from our last episode. You spoke about trusting that the seeds that you've planted in a child's childhood, like the love that you've invested there, that's going to flower at a later point in life. And so you don't have to be pushing it all the time, but you can
Yep.
actually just trust that that's going to work. Yeah.
Yep. Not to force it, but to wait for it and nurture
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Thank you very
Good
much,
stuff.
Dad. Great. That was really enjoyable.
Thank you.